What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the College Football Show here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. I am Noah Hiles. He is Andrew Destin. We're your college football writers here at the PG. And Andrew, we made it. Final week of the regular season. Can you believe it? It seems like it kind of flew by.
It feels like yesterday, man. It was Thursday. We were just getting started September 1st. We had Memorial Day week or Labor Day weekend coming up, and it was, college football's getting started. And now look where we are. It's November. Thanksgiving's upon us. It's been a crazy ride. It's unbelievable to think we're here. And both teams, have had solid seasons in different respects based on how you want to look at it. But I would be surprised if you and I were on the agreement that the season went exactly according to plan, because I don't know if I saw this coming for either team. But
No, honestly, this is kind of what these programs do at this point. Pitt's a 7 to 8 win team every year. Penn State's a 9 to 10 win team every year. Penn State can't beat, the teams it normally isn't supposed to beat, Ohio State and Michigan. Pitt normally will compete well against teams that are ranked ahead of it, and it will lose a couple of games it's supposed to win, which is kind of how it all played out. So, Andrew, with this being the final week of the regular season, with both Pitt and Penn State pretty much out of contention to play in their conference championships, I think now is the time to kind of really reflect on the best moments of this season. We've had some exciting ones for both the teams we cover. For all the good and bad, there's been plenty for us both to write about, I think, which is, what we get in the business for. But I wanted to ask, what was Penn State when people think back to the 2022 Penn State Nittany Lions season? And aside from, reliving the horrific losses against Ohio State and Michigan, what's the best moment that people are going to remember this year for Penn State?
I'm going to start off with that beginning of the season. I'll go back to the Purdue game on the road, national television, night out, blackout by the fans there at Purdue. I think it was a perfect exemplification of exactly the quarterback that Sean Clifford is when he threw a pick six that gave Purdue the lead and the place was going nuts. And I'm sitting there rewriting my game story like Sean Clifford is the GOAT and not in the good way, right? Like I was putting that piece together. And then sure enough, he comes back and does what Sean Clifford has seemingly done all through his career is play maddening football through the third, the fourth quarters, frustrating fans to no end, and then pulling something out of his bag that nobody saw coming, leading the touchdown drive late, giving Penn State a win. And that was a game that I went into the year saying, this is a loss, and so is Michigan, Ohio State. 9-3 is the best case scenario. And sure enough, they won that game. And I think that set the tone that this Penn State team might not be perfect, but they're going to be a lot better than people expect them to be in a lot of different facets, whether that was the run game, the offensive line. There were those flashes in that game that gave you the excitement that, hey, they might be onto something here. And as the last 3 weeks have shown, Penn State is far from the first or second best team in the Big Ten, but they're a pretty clear-cut number 3. And that first game against Purdue kind of showcased that Penn State's got something more than they have the last couple of years.
For me, I think that I'm going to stick around on the same day. While yours is a big moment for this season, I think what Pitt did on September 1st, that game will be remembered for forever by Pitt fans. It just, for so many reasons. It was the return of the backyard brawl. In this city, the Steelers hadn't started yet, so it was the only thing fans were talking about in this area. Just sports fans in general. Even Penn State people were in on the dialogue about Pitt, West Virginia. I would argue that there were no Pitt fans flipping to the Penn State game, but I bet you there were plenty of Penn State fans who were tuning in just to see, because it was a return of one of college football's biggest rivalries. And it had been a 10-year absence. It was the highest attended sporting event in the history of the city of Pittsburgh. And the way it finished, that MJ Devonshire pick six, that's one that's going to be on the highlight reels every time Pitt and West Virginia play, similar to the ending to the 13-9 game, the Darrelle Revis punt return. All those moments that for people like me who grew up in Pittsburgh, going to Pitt games that you saw live, you remember where you were when you saw those plays. I'll never forget that Devonshire pick six and just the narrative that it created and just the story that it told. And at that point in time, there was so much excitement around Pitt. They were number 17 in the country. They just got this big win. The stadium was packed. Tennessee was coming into town next week, and the possibilities seemed endless. And while the rest of the year kind of fell flat, it's corny saying it, but Panther fans will proudly admit they will always have that backyard brawl win. Like that's one thing that they'll always be able to cherish. And as someone that, and for me being that my first game I ever covered at the Post-Gazette, that's one of the rare ones where you frame and you put on a wall. Not even necessarily because I was super proud of the story that I wrote. I had to write it in a rush because I had to like you said, rewrite the entire thing.
Right.
But at the very end, but it's just a night I'll never forget. Just one of the coolest things I've ever covered. So those are the best moments. We'll focus now on this week. We talked about the beginning of the season. Here's the season finale. Pitt on the road against Miami. Penn State hosting Michigan State. I wouldn't call these rivalries, but these are two matchups that have gone on for a while. Pitt and Miami go all the way back to the Big East days, and the great teams that both had in the 80s and everything. And Penn State and Michigan State have obviously played a ton of meaningful football games. And while one team is clearly better than the other in both of these matchups, I still think that anything can kind of happen when you have two programs who are so familiar with each other. We saw that last year with Pitt Miami, with Tyler Van Dyke and company came in and really squashed any hope Pitt had of even trying to play spoiler and sneak into that college football playoff. So, Andrew, we'll start off with you. What are your three keys to Penn State against Michigan State?
Yeah, first thing that stands out to me is generate turnovers. And the reason I bring that up is the quarterback for Michigan State, Peyton Thorne, had a pretty successful season last year when he had Kenneth Walker III as his running back, right? Pretty good guy to lean on there.
Yeah.
Now this year, it's kind of been the Peyton Thorne show. And that's not to say that he's been bad. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards, 63% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns. The problem is he's thrown 10 picks. It's the second most in the Big Ten. He's not been careful with the football. And last year when Penn State played against Michigan State, he had a costly pick six that almost cost the game for Michigan State, where a local guy, Daquan Hardy out of Penn Hills, he had the pick six. Peyton Thorne is not somebody who's careful with the football. He's a downfield thrower. He's going to take his shots. Can this Nittany Lions secondary without Joey Porter Jr., who's been out with the appendicitis, who knows if he comes back on Saturday? Regardless, this secondary, Penn State, it's shown to be the strength. They've produced some turnovers. They've got 11 interceptions on the year. So something's got to give there. Got to believe that on home field, Penn State's going to generate a couple of turnovers against Thorne. The second thing is run the ball. This Michigan State run defense and defense in general is not good. Under Mel Tucker, who's known as an offensive-minded coach, Michigan State, I think, is 109th in the country in total defense out of 131 teams. And that's in the Big Ten, where James Franklin earlier this week talked about that it seems like in the Big Ten, every team you play, they might not have the best offense, but they're like 6th in the Big Ten in total defense and 12th in the nation because nobody's particularly good on offense, but nobody's bad on defense. That's not the case with Michigan State. This defense isn't very good. It's a little bit banged up. And then it's, the national story that people know about, the 8 players for Michigan State who were suspended in that altercation in the tunnel at Michigan. Those 8 guys, all defensive players. They haven't been playing. They haven't been practicing. And as a result, Michigan State this week for the 4th week in a row, they're practicing without hitting at practice, without pads. They just don't have the numbers to be able to do that. So the defensive side of the ball really in disarray there as a program for the Spartans, and just run the ball down their throat if you're Penn State. That's what you got to do to get the victory. And the third thing is just be clean on special teams. Michigan State has arguably the best punter in the country in Bryce Behringer, 49 yards per punt when he gets him up in the air. He's had a 60-yarder in, I think, 7 of the 11 games. He's a really good punter. But Penn State will be out without its punt returner, Parker Washington. He's out for the year with an undisclosed injury. He'll be the Western Kentucky transfer, Mitchell Tinsley back there, returning punts probably. It's what he did against Rutgers. So I'm curious to watch that matchup with arguably the best punter in the country against a backup punt returner for the Nittany Lions. But what are you looking for this weekend, Noah, with the Hurricanes?
Andrew, right now, Pitt's victory formula is so clear. It's just let the defense win you the game, and offense and special teams just don't screw it up. That's really what it's come down to. It's offense, let number 2 do his thing. Everyone else stay out of the way and let the defense win you the football game. And that's what's happened the last 3 weeks, really. The offense hasn't been spectacular in any of those, but Pitt's defense has scored 3 touchdowns and a safety so far this month in November. And they still have one more football game that it'll play in. So I think the first key is just win the game on defense. I don't think it's out of the question for this group to put more points on the board. I don't think they'll get 2 pick sixes in the first 2 plays of the game again, but they've shown the ability where whether it be a safety late in the game to clinch it, a stop on a 2-point conversion in the final minute of the game that could tie it. If they are not put in situations where their back's against the wall, which come from the special teams getting punts blocked or the offense turning the ball over, if you just let the defense win you this game, it will win you this game. That's so key number one is just let the defense win you the football game. Key number two, the way the defense wins this football game is pressuring the quarterback. Tyler Van Dyke has missed 3 of his last 4 games. They don't know. I've read something where they say he might play Saturday. Who knows? I don't really see the benefit in trotting him out there. I guess maybe just to try to get them in a bowl. I don't know how motivated Miami would even be to play in a bowl, considering the expectations they entered this season with, the fact that they're sitting at 5 wins. I don't see that team being super hungry. And the fact that Pitt's not ranked, it's not even like they can really take anything away from Pitt. I don't know why Tyler Van Dyke would really want to play in this game, aside from the fact that he just loves playing football, which I'm sure he does. But assuming that he doesn't play, one of the 2 backups that Miami puts in, Pitt's just got to feast on him. And I think they're capable of doing that. Their defensive line has been great. They're one of the top sack teams in the country now after this dominant month they've had in November. And just forcing young backups into making mistakes through pressure. We saw it in the Syracuse game. They never had a chance because their offense could not move the football through the air, which meant they couldn't run the ball because teams who can't throw against Narduzzi's defense never really run the ball well against it because they're always bringing pressure. Key number 3 is time of possession. Notice, I'm not even saying scoring. Pitt's offense, you don't need to score a ton of points. We've seen this before. A couple of touchdowns and field goals will do it. It's just not letting the other team get their offense in a rhythm. And that comes from them making mistakes. Long drives are the key for Pitt. When they're one of the best time of possession teams in the country. I think last week was the first week of the entire season. Pitt did not win the time of possession battle. Every other week, they pretty much won it. So if they can just keep the opposing offense off the field, allow their defense to recharge and regroup and come back out well-rested and ready to make more plays, they don't need to necessarily put points on the board the whole time. Abanikanda, if he does play, will be fine. He will score. Hammond Jr., another great running back, regardless of who they have in the backfield. They'll find the end zone. Slovis will make a couple of plays. It's just not making the bad plays. Those are the real keys. Just keep your offense on the field, keep the drives turning, long drives, lots of time of possession, and let your defense do its thing. Pitt should be okay. 8-4, and you're looking at a decent bowl game. So those are my 3 keys. So Andrew, we move forward now for our national segment, and there's stuff we could talk about. I mean, I love rivalry week. It's the best. This is the best time. They always say it in like the spring when the NBA finals and all that stuff is going on in the Stanley Cup and you have MLB and all that. But like with the World Cup happening right now, plus all the great college football, NFL, we're in the nitty gritty of the NFL regular season. You have NHL and NBA also going on, and college basketball, Maui Invitational. I've been watching it all week. Like there's so much fun stuff to consume right now, but I mean, rivalry Saturday, man, it's the best. And Ohio State, Michigan playing at noon. That's great. To me, this current week of college football is so much more enticing than the following week with Conference Championship Week. And the reason being, in my opinion, is because I think, the playoff always kind of has this way of it really figuring itself out, minus maybe one team who might get snubbed, right? And this is the week that happens. So my question to you, Andrew, is next week for Conference Championship Week, which all these matchups are all but determined, I believe. Is this like the least exciting Conference Championship weekend we can look forward to ahead? Where if you look at it, at least 2 of these playoff spots are already determined. There's nothing Georgia can really do aside from losing out, which, let's be real, it's not going to happen. Georgia's going to be in there, and Ohio State and or Michigan will be in there, even if it loses in the Big Ten title game. With 2 of those 4 spots already determined, and Michigan likely getting one of the other 2 spots, or Ohio State, depending on who loses that matchup Saturday afternoon, we don't have a lot to look forward to as far as playoff seeding and stuff goes Saturday. Would you agree with what I'm saying here, that it's going to be a boring conference championship Saturday?
Yeah, I think so. But first, I'll say the Yellow Jackets want to have a word with you against Georgia. I mean, come on, they beat Pitt. They're going to beat Georgia too, right?
They beat North Carolina. They beat my Heisman pick.
Yeah, man, they're showing their buzz. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, though, it's really, I mean, a lot of this is already predetermined. The only point I want to make to you and get your thoughts on is with LSU being as highly ranked as it is right now in the college football playoff, if they beat Georgia when that conference championship game comes, that's the only one that's really interesting to me because with them being right now, as high as they are, there is a scenario, right, where if they beat Georgia, that they could sneak their way in. Am I reading into that wrong? Because I mean, it's crazy. They have 2 losses to me that feels like they shouldn't be even a conversation starter, but they're right up there near the top.
They're in the mix for sure, and I think the way they get in is if TCU loses Saturday against Iowa State, or if it loses. I think a 2-loss LSU team that wins the SEC probably gets in over TCU. I don't think LSU with 2 losses gets in over a 1-loss USC team. However, if USC loses to Notre Dame Saturday, they're done. And
Yep.
so LSU only has one more thing to jump. But I will say that a 1-loss Michigan team or a 1-loss Ohio State team that doesn't make it to the Big Ten title, it's still getting in over LSU. So I think the 4th spot will come down to if TCU can remain undefeated, and if TCU does lose, what will that loss look like, and if USC can win out. But I personally, I don't think USC is going to win out. I'm a pretty big believer in what the Irish are going to do Saturday afternoon. And I'm not Catholic. I'm just making guesses here, folks.
No, totally
no
agree.
bias.
No, totally agree with you there. I mean, just to highlight that game, this Notre Dame team is so different from the one that lost to Marshall. Their ability
Right.
to run the football and how bad of a run defense that USC has. I mean, they give 45 points to UCLA, and I'm not saying UCLA doesn't have a good offense, but I mean, Notre Dame's got a heck of a lot better defense than UCLA does. If USC can't put up 40 points again, they might be in trouble. I mean, that's going to be an exciting game. So I guess that goes to your point that all of these games are a lot more interesting than the conference championship week.
Right. This is the week where the playoff is really going to get decided, unless if everyone wins, aside from either Ohio State and or Michigan, because they both can't win. Which I just don't see that happening. There's going to be one loss that makes this a clearer picture. I also want to make one final note. At the beginning of this year, we were all laughing at Brian Kelly, and we were all questioning if Marcus Freeman deserved the Notre Dame job. And maybe we should just reserve our takes until the end of the year, because it turns out both of those guys have done a hell of a job in their first year at the helm of their programs. So, not that they need it, but congrats to both of them.
Right.
Andrew, any final thoughts as we wrap up this show?
Just hearing you talk about the backyard brawl makes me more and more excited that next year Penn State gets to play West Virginia. And man, oh man, I wish that Penn State, West Virginia, Pitt, I wish they all played each other every year because man, oh man, those games are fun.
Yes, they are. They really are. I get to cover Pitt, West Virginia again, unless, they decide they're done with me here at the Post-Gazette, which I hope doesn't happen. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow us on social media and stick around. We'll have more content. We'll review the end of the season. We'll talk some bowl games next week. It'll be conference championship week. Pitt and Penn State won't be in it, but we'll still be here to talk about it all here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.